Hey there, all you friends, true believers, and newcomers alike. Superfly Comics Guy here, bringing you an omnibus review of Moon Knight by Huston, Benson, and Hurwitz. We'll be taking a look, as always, at the cover, the spine, the contents collected, the build quality, and a flip through where I can share some of my thoughts, opinions, and recommendations with you on this book. So if you like the video at any point, you know what to do. And if you're a nerd like me, leave a comment down below with your thoughts. But I hope you're not wearing a shiny white suit because things are about to get bloody. Let's go. Alright, so we're starting off here with the dust cover to this omnibus. A gorgeous standard edition cover here by Mr. David Finch. Hell yes. There is a direct market cover available by Mike Deodato Jr., which is pretty cool. It's got an interesting perspective from like a creature's mouth and everything, but I mean, like, come on. What was I gonna do? Not go for the David Finch cover? Pfft, what do you take me for? Some kind of lunatic? There is the spine. Really nice design here too. Yet another David Finch image. And the back, you guessed it, another David Finch image. The darkest, bloodiest era in Moon Knight's history. Yeah, no freaking kidding, but we'll get into that in a bit. This collects the 2006 Moon Knight series 1 through 30, the Moon Knight Annual, number 1, the Moon Knight Silent Knight, Vengeance of the Moon Knight 1 through 10, and Shadowland Moon Knight 1 through 3. Cover price is $125 US, $156.25 Canadian. Let's flip this over and have a look under this dust jacket. Hell yeah, dude, look at that. Another David Finch image here on the board and a wraparound. Yeah, Marvel knew exactly what they were doing when they were designing this book. My God, look at that. So freaking cool, am I right? But enough of that. Time to see what waits for us on the inside. Okay guys, so as I said, let's dive through this together. Got some black bookend pages there, and we're also greeted by a contents page, which is nice. No page numbers, but it is split up into sections here. So if, that might help you organize your reading sessions. I certainly found it helpful. But otherwise, we're straight into this. Moon Knight number 1, The Bottom. And I gotta say, I love the way this opens up. So cool, because look at this. Someone has to do this. The other guys, the world savers, they got their own jobs to do. A giant monster pops out of the ground in the financial district. Call the Fantastic Four. Invasion of alien vessels? That's what the Avengers are for. That leaves this. Spidey? He's got his hands full with all the B-list supervillains. So someone has to do this. Someone has to do the fun stuff. Hell yeah, David Finch bringing his A game. Look at this freaking spread page, man. But anyway, let's talk about this series. So, well, if you're not familiar with Moon Knight, I have already kind of covered that in my previous Moon Knight Omnibus reviews of Volume 1 and Volume 2. But the first thing you should really know about this series is, as I said, it was coming out in the 2000s. And this is a much more mainstream, quote-unquote, depiction of Moon Knight. This is very street level. He doesn't have his moon-based powers this time. And even his other personalities like, Jake Lockley and Stephen Grant are absent here. So it's kind of more approachable in that sense, but we find out that something happened in the recently that severed Mark's connection with Khonshu. And, it left him alone, depressed in a drunken haze, succumbed to pills. He had a falling out with Marlene and his friend Jean-Paul, also known as Frenchie. He lost touch with Gina and Crawley, and you're kind of taken aback because it's weird seeing everybody so fed up with Mark. You're like, what happened? And you come to discover shortly after that recently Moon Knight had a grisly, brutal, crippling fight with his arch nemesis, Bushman, to the point where he mutilates him and cuts his face off. It's just this brutal, desperate fight, and it ended up leaving Mark just spiraling into a violent spell. But he finds himself, desperate. He wants to be a hero again. He wants to be connected to Khonshu again. So Crawley comes along and tries to reconnect Mark with Jean-Paul, his friend, and slowly but surely, Mark starts to take steps to donning the outfit again. But that also means Khonshu returns. And I gotta say, the way he's depicted in this is kind of hilarious, because what ends up happening is that Moon Knight starts hallucinating Khonshu appearing as Bushman, the guy I just talked about, his arch nemesis. And this is the part where that really kind of exacerbates the issues with Mark's sanity, because Khonshu just kind of acts like the devil on Mark's shoulder this whole time, or really the Palpatine on Mark's shoulder, because Khonshu, being the moon god of vengeance and everything, he wants blood. He wants Mark to be violent. So it's actually kind of funny, because Mark will be talking with another character, and then you'll just see Khonshu in the back, kill him, do it. You know you want to. Come on, do it. Kill him. It's actually really funny. But anyway, that kind of continues on throughout the course of the book. The committee returns, which is a kind of a callback to Moon Knight's first appearance in Werewolf by Night. So you'll definitely appreciate that if you've read Moon Knight Omnibus Volume 1. This book also features the first appearance of the Profile, who's a pretty interesting character. He can read and analyze people just by looking at them, and kind of figure out stuff like their weaknesses, their habits, that kind of stuff. But you'll also get an appearance by Taskmaster. Now, if you don't know who Taskmaster is, he's pretty cool, because what he can do is basically instantly memorize and replicate an opponent's fighting style after observing them once. So you can imagine that's how is a hero supposed to deal with that? That seems pretty complicated. And this is the part that tells you all you need to know about Moon Knight, because how does Moon Knight deal with him? Well, he doesn't. He crashes a helicopter into a meeting room that Taskmaster is in, completely skipping the fight altogether. And that's kind of the thing about Moon Knight. He doesn't tackle problems in a very conventional way. He doesn't just give beatings either. He's happy to take a lot of punishment in the process. There's actually a really cool bit in this book where Moon Knight's like, I don't wear white to be stealthy. I wear white so that they'll see me coming. Yeah, pretty freaking cool. But yeah, he definitely relishes in the violence. But yeah, for the first 15 issues or so, Charlie Huston is writing the book, and then after that, Mike Benson takes over writing for the next 15 issues. And I don't know if it's just me, but I actually found that I enjoyed Benson's writing more than Huston's. But still, there's a lot of stuff happening in this run. Moon Knight encounters a serial murderer named Midnight, who is leaving bodies gruesomely dismembered just to try to get Moon Knight's attention. Civil war is happening around this time, so you can kind of find out how Moon Knight feels about the whole superhero politics kind of thing. I mean, let's be honest, do you really think he cares? But let's just say he gets pretty creative with how he works around that. But still, with the amount of violence that is kind of encapsulating Moon Knight around this time, there's a lot of eyes on him, especially by the general public, and it's really not going over well with them, because they start to confront S.H.I.E.L.D. and Tony Stark like, what are you doing? How are you allowing this guy to go on these violent sprees? I thought you were supposed to be heroes. This isn't what heroes do. So that causes a lot of tension between Moon Knight, S.H.I.E.L.D., and Iron Man, who's the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. at this time. especially once Moon Knight starts getting framed for murders. Because all the while, as I mentioned, Moon Knight is trying to repair all these broken relationships, with Marlene and Jean-Paul and Gina and Crawley. But it's tough for them too, because they don't agree with all of what Moon Knight's doing, all the violence. So it's a lot about Moon Knight's sanity and personal relationships. That's kind of the crux of this book. But the art is generally no slouch either. Like, as I mentioned, you're getting David Finch early on, but he leaves after a bit, and you do get a lot of other artists. For example, Miko Swayan, who does have a very similar style to David Finch. Also Mike Deodato, Jeromo Peña, even Taneng Huat, who I talked about in my Ghost Rider by Jason Aaron Omnibus review. And I wasn't a big fan of Taneng Huat's art in that book, but in this book, it was I found it to be generally pretty good. Definitely enjoyed it much more than his work in that Ghost Rider book. If I had to pick a minor complaint about the art, I'd say sometimes the layouts can be a bit awkward and jumpy, and occasionally it can be just tough to follow what's going on, but it doesn't happen too often. Now, I don't want to talk too much more about the story, so we can go on to this next section here, which is Vengeance of the Moon Knight. This is the 2009 run, so it does feel like a separate chapter. You can see Moon Knight actually has a little bit of a different look. It actually looks a lot like Batman's suit from The Dark Knight. Everything from the armor pieces and the utility belt and everything. But in this sort of section, Moon Knight is trying not to be violent anymore. He's on the path to recovery. And I found this to be pretty fun. I don't really recall this series having the best reputation, but I found it to be pretty enjoyable. And there is a really fun crossover with Deadpool in here, especially. Now, the final section you get in here is called Shadowland Moon Knight. Now, if you don't know what Shadowland is, it was a Daredevil event that was happening around this time. So these are just the tie-ins to that event. Sort of. They don't really have that much to do with Shadowland. But let's start off with the positives to this section. The covers are nice, I guess. And yeah, that's about it. I gotta be honest, I did not enjoy this section at all, really. I didn't really like the art as much as the other sections. There's this really pointless MacGuffin object that Moon Knight is chasing the whole time, which actually doesn't really seem to be that relevant at all in the end. They bring back another character from Moon Knight's past, and they make a really dumb choice with Marlene in here as well. Basically, without spoiling anything, they make a big decision involving Marlene, but then they choose not to commit to that decision, and it's basically just for the sake of setting up false stakes. And then the way they walk it back is just an insult to the character compared to how she was written and handled before. It's just really bad. The Shadowland Moon Knight just sucks. This part of the book is just entirely skippable, which is unfortunate because, the rest of the book was pretty strong, so it sucks to end on such a sour note here at the end. Now we can talk about the extras here in this book. You're going to get some variants here, which are very nice. We can take a look at some of those. There's the cover to Moon Knight Omnibus Volume 2 by Alex Ross. I love that one. David Finch. More Alex Ross covers. Lionel Francis Yu. Some really, really nice variants here. Oh, there's one by Adi Granov. Of course, the cover to this Omni. But this is pretty cool. You get some scripts by Charlie Huston. And I found this interesting just to see how much of the script informed the art. There's like instructions on how to draw certain panels and stuff. Speaking of which, you get some of those here. This is pretty cool. You get an interview with David Finch. This is nice because it talks about his process. He goes over some of his perceived strengths and weaknesses. There's an afterword here by Charlie Huston where he talks a bit about how he got into Moon Knight. And then you get a bunch of, classic extras like your layouts here. There's a fun little reference to Detective Comics 27. But yeah, there you go. Oh, yes, and his a character bio here. That's always fun. But there you go. That's it for your extras. Okay, so now we can talk about the build quality. So this omnibus has 1,184 pages. There's what my eye looks like. If you watched my haul video where I featured this book for the first time, you'll know I had some issues with my binding and the eye. I don't know, the quality control was not here. There was a lot of glue leaking on the inside of the spine that I had to fix. This little headband piece just feels very cheap. I did notice some instances of ink smudges as I was reading through. Not often, just like a couple times, but that's not something you normally expect to see in these omnibuses. The gutter loss isn't great with this eye. Towards the beginning and end, you're going to have cases where spread pages are blocked by the gutter loss. And the paper is very, very flimsy. If you have panels where there's lots of light colors, you're going to get a decent amount of page bleed. But in terms of how it lays over, it lays over pretty well. Over here we don't really get gutter loss. It's usually just when there's like a big spread page. And like I said, you do get that contents page at the beginning of this book, so that's nice. But generally the build quality on this book really lets it down, which sucks because Marvel did such a phenomenal job designing it, from the covers to the spine to the design on the board. That was really well done, so it just sucks that the actual build of the book is not that great. But just to wrap up some thoughts here, if you're looking for a starting point for Moon Knight and you're wondering if this book is suitable for that, yeah, I'd say so. This is a pretty decent starting point from reading Moon Knight if you want something more modern. But I'll say you'll definitely get the most out of it if you've read some of Moon Knight's older material, like his 80s solo series by Doug Mensch and Bill Sienkiewicz. But even so, there were some moments in here that I could tell were referencing some events from the 90s Mark Spector Moon Knight series, which I haven't read, but I was still generally able to follow along without a problem. If you're a fan of great art, there's a lot of it to be had in here. I just got to mention that I don't know if it's my particular copy, but the build quality is pretty rough on this book that I have here. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, even though this may be viewed as a more mainstream version of Moon Knight just because he doesn't have his moon powers, or it doesn't feature his alternate personalities as much, I still think there's a lot to be enjoyed here if you're curious about the character. And hey, it may spur you to try out some of his other stuff. Just for the love of God, skip the Shadowland part at the end of this omnibus. But that'll do it for me, guys. That's been my review of the Moon Knight Omnibus by Huston, Benson, and Hurwitz. Let me know what you thought about the book or the review. Leave your thoughts down below, guys. But thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to catch you in another video real soon, so you have yourself a great day. I've been Superfly Comics Guy, and until next time, you keep reading. Bye, guys.